Yes. I'm so glad you said that. Hello, everybody. We're going to get going now. I'm Mike Cronin. I cover startups, finance, and technology for the Austin Business Journal. And today we're going to talk about the value of women investing in women. We'd like you to think about your questions that we'll give you time to ask at the last 20 minutes of the panel. But we'd also like to request that you keep your questions in a way that they can benefit everybody and not tell your personal story and get personal advice. If you want to do that, you can talk to the panelists after. We'd like to ask first, how many of you are entrepreneurs? Okay, and how many of you are investors? Great, thank you. All right, I'm going to let each of our panelists introduce themselves.
You want to start? No. Hi, I'm Pam Ryan, and I am the managing partner of the Tingari Group, which includes the Tingari Foundation. I manage a range of assets which range from a venture capital to a sheep station in Australia. I, like many women, am very difficult to confine to a label or a box. And so I am a trained psychologist in Australia. I have lived in the United States and particularly in Austin, Texas for the last 30 years. And I was here in Austin as Austin became explosive with growth and watched a lot of the local legends being born, including Austin Ventures and Silicon Labs, Home Away, Kendra Scott Jewellery, and even South by Southwest. So during that time, I did my PhD at the University of Texas, and I often joke that I was a PhD, but I was a dumb blonde. I deferred investment decisions to my partner and allowed that to send me off all over the world doing humanitarian work as a psychologist. But when he and I separated, I worked out that the buck stops with me, and I need to take responsibility for the dollars that I invest and the dollars that I spend. So that, and up until then, I'd also been a fairly passive, limited partner in Austin Ventures as well as other venture capital firms. Today, I'm an active limited partner, have been so for about 10 years, and I'm a limited partner in venture capital firms in both the US and in Australia. And my goal is to try to get more and more women to be active investors and particularly active limited partners as we assume much of the world's wealth over the next 10 to 15 years, which we will. Women are set to inherit something like, or to have the transfer of something like 70% of the world's wealth by 2030. So we need to step up.
I'm Sarah Brand. I'm the founding general partner of True Wealth Ventures based here in Austin. We invest in women-led companies, which we're defining as at least one woman of significant decision-making influence is on that founding early-stage executive team in the markets of sustainable consumer and consumer health, where women are making 85% of consumer purchase decisions and 80% of all healthcare decisions. So really markets where gender-diverse teams have a real advantage of understanding the customer and market need better. My background educationally is engineering. I have 3 degrees in mechanical engineering. Spent a lot of time, like 20 years or so, in the semiconductor electronics tech industry, originally more technical roles and strategic management consulting, then venture capital, and then more operational roles, running business units or doing M&A and integrating venture capital-backed companies into larger companies. Also started a brewery, and if you haven't gotten the theme, it's been very male-dominated between mechanical engineering, semiconductors, beer, venture capital. And so finally, I started this fund after becoming the executive sponsor of the Global Women's Forum at my Fortune 500 tech company I was at, because I was the only woman who was a vice president who had any technical or operational background. And so that's when I finally started doing my homework and became aware that that was true. I had been completely blind to it because I had been so used to as I say, having the bathroom to myself my whole career in education. And so, just saw the financial outperformance of companies which had more women in senior leadership positions, whether they were the big Fortune 500, tech companies, or they were the small venture capital-backed companies. It was consistent, and saw this massive blind spot, particularly in venture capital, where you've probably seen the numbers, but the estimate is about 1% or so of actual investment decision makers at VC firms are women. 2%, just slightly over 2%, holding steady 6 years in a row now, of female-founded companies are getting venture capital dollars, and those companies financially outperform. They solve a lot of problems that aren't getting solved today, et cetera, et cetera. So one other data point I wanted to share is that that True Wealth Ventures recently closed our first fund, and over 80% of our investors were women. Woo! Yeah, so either women, single women, women who were driving that investment decision from their partnership or from their family office or their foundation. And so I'm really seeing more and more the power of women investing in women. So we'll talk more about that, obviously. But
Hi, I'm Stephanie Breedlove. I am the co-founder of Care.com HomePay. I'm a new author. I'm an active angel investor and a very active mentor. And a little bit of real-life story behind the list of titles. The real-life story is I, for some strange reason, tossed aside a thriving career with Accenture to co-found a self-funded business in 1992 that started in my basement and grew from startup to scale to exit out of profitability, because in 1992, the funding ecosystem, as difficult as it is today, was almost non-existent for the entrepreneur. And the entrepreneur was almost a misunderstood or non-existent word then. So I've traveled this journey from startup to scale to exit over 20 years as the evolution of women in the workplace has progressed, as the evolution of technology has progressed, as our fast-paced world has progressed, as women have reached equality in education, but are struggling and striving in every other aspects of business. And today, I am actually paying it forward as an angel investor, as a mentor and an author, to try to play my singular role in being early in the evolution to help women who are founders and want to be investors be it because they can see it.
Thanks, everybody. The first question I'd like to ask is, why is it important for women to invest in women?
And maybe before you ask that, let me just define the roles
Sure.
That we have on the title slide, which is Pam is representing a limited partner, I'm representing a general partner, and Stephanie is representing an angel investor and a woman entrepreneur. So if you look at women investing in women, we're looking at it primarily through a venture capital lens in this talk, but women VC firms so a general partner is an actual investment decision maker at a venture capital firm, and so firms can invest in women entrepreneurs without general partners, but if there is a woman general partner at a VC firm, they're 2 times more likely to invest in a company with a woman founder, 3 times more likely to invest in a company with a woman as a CEO. So, regardless of investment strategy or having any kind of gender diversity strategy, those are just the numbers. If you're a woman GP, you tend to invest more in women entrepreneurs. And then limited partners are the investors into the venture capital firms. So they're largely pension funds, actually. Over 75% of the VC dollars come from these big institutional investors, but the other portion comes from individuals, from family offices, from foundations, and those are all called limited partners that own a percentage of these funds that are run by general partners. So, little context.
Great, thanks.
You're welcome.
Well, an angel investment.
Oh, sorry, I forgot about angel investment. Oh, yes. So, so VC funds, they're varied in terms of what stage they invest in, but usually before a fund comes in or alongside seed stage, like early stage VC funds, angel investors invest. So, generically speaking, as companies that could be venture backable eventually start, they'll get friends and family, or they'll get bootstrapped by their founders, and then angels come in kind of in that next round.
And can I add to that, Sarah?
Please.
At the Tingari Group, we think of capital in a much more holistic way as well than angel investing, venture capital investing. We also do direct impact investing. We fund micro financing, so we do micro investing. We do mentoring and coaching. We also think about women in a variety of different ways. So we fund awards and competitions. So that's another investment in women. So there are lots of different ways to invest. Networking, for example, women are particularly good at network, so we invest networking capital by brokering relationships. So lots of different ways to think about investing.
Yeah.
And I'll throw one little stat in there to wrap it up, to give you some good data. If you're a founder looking to seek money, or if you're a woman thinking you might want to invest and where's the right place for you, here's some dollar amounts that will help you decide where you best fit. Most people who are seeking angel investment are early stage and usually are raising somewhere between a couple $100,000 and about 1.5 million. Those who are looking to raise more than that, in the kind of $2 to $5 million range, that's early seed stage for venture capital. And then above 10 million is late stage. You're a mature company, but you're going to diversify into other places and the funds are large. Like Sarah's fund is almost 20 million. So there's some dollar benchmarks.
Great, thanks. Why don't we start with you, Pam? Tell us why it's important to invest in women as a woman.
Okay. We started out investing in women not just for the feminist imperative, but for an impact imperative. We set about in 2011, and part of my work, probably more so than being a limited partner, is as a researcher. And in 2011, after having funded through our foundation the Social Entrepreneur of the Year award for 10 years here in Austin, we said, what have we gotten for $1 million of grant money? And so we decided to partner with the Institute for the Future and look at what was the future of social entrepreneurship. What did social entrepreneurship look like in 2030? And in the course of the research, we came to the conclusion that we had to drop the social, as millennials were demanding purpose and repurposing. Baby boomers were also doing the same thing. That we eventually turned the research into the future of entrepreneurship and impact. And what we found was that this impact imperative, and as we started to work with our financial team to say we want to convert our entire portfolio to positive impact, they found that really difficult, and the data out there about ESG or anything to do with impact is really very scant. And so we said, okay, as a proxy for positive impact, let's look at the number of women on boards or the number of women in senior management roles. And the financial management team was equally as shocked as we were that there were very few of women in the top 500, Fortune 500 companies, very few in venture capital, very few entrepreneurs receiving venture capital, even though 40% of new businesses are started by women. And so we decided that we would convert the portfolio as a first effort to women, and then we started looking at the performance data for women. And it turns out that women, whether it's their presence in a Fortune 500 company, in a venture capital fund, in a startup, the performance of women makes a huge difference, or the inclusion of women makes a huge difference to the financial performance of that company. One of the reasons for that is that women, it's been demonstrated in study after study, that women actually raise the collective intelligence of any decision-making group. and they bring to the table skills that are not natural necessarily to men, but when they're combined with the skills and attributes men have, then the collective intelligence of the groups rise. So even if the average intelligence of average IQ of a group is really high, if there is no woman on that group, then the group with a woman will outperform the men. So we invest for the financial imperative as well and the performance imperative. We also invest because women give back, and the research also shows that women reinvest a lot of the money that they make into things like healthcare, all the positive impact things that we're interested in, healthcare, education, the environment. And they also, the research shows that if women were empowered to equally participate in the workforce by 2025, they would add to the global wealth the equivalent of the Chinese and the US economy combined. So we invest for both the micro benefits of group intelligence and better decision making, but we also invest for what comes back to the whole of society.
So as a general partner at a VC firm, our proactive investment strategy is to invest specifically and only in what we're calling women-led companies. And it's primarily a financial thesis that, like Pam just reviewed a lot of numbers, so they, companies with more women in senior leadership perform significantly financially better. And I can share data with this audience, but I think we're probably all bought into that. So the reasons why we do that beyond the financial thesis is that it's been shown, again, for venture capital funds that bring a woman investment partner on board, that actually doesn't move the needle much in terms of, 2% of VC dollars are going to women-led companies today. So yes, with a GP on board that's a woman, the chance of that fund investing in a women-led company goes up 2x, but that means that's 4% of the portfolio. So, it moves the needle. Those numbers can sound good or really small, depending on which way you spin them. So, we really think a proactive gender diversity strategy, a proactive gender lens is required in order to actually move the needle. And so I think as a woman, that's why we're really being proactive, because there's such unconscious bias out there, and it's not male investors not investing. Well, it's not male investors against women entrepreneurs. It's culture against women entrepreneurs. And another reason why we're investing in women is that we see that women are seeing problems that the male entrepreneurs aren't seeing. Because if you look at who's making the investment decisions today in the venture capital firms, it's largely a certain segment of society that's holding those positions of power, and they're investing in folks that are like them for the most part, because as a venture capitalist, you're trying to reduce your risk. You're trying to invest in areas that you understand better, into people that you know or you've worked with before, or at least you understand better, that are similar to you. And so that's a certain type of person that's making the investment decisions and getting the investment dollars. And so there's certain problems that they're familiar with and that they see in their lifestyles. And there's a lot of other problems that we're seeing that women entrepreneurs see that the current VC community doesn't see. So lots of areas of innovation that have not been innovated on, especially in these areas, improving environmental and human health, because women just have a front row seat in those markets.
So why do I invest in companies founded by women? And we were trickling down to the individual story. I'm here to encourage you, and it's why you're in this session, to not do what I did and have it just kind of, organically happen over decades, but to consciously make choices. When you walk out of this room today, as you run your business, or as you have means to begin to decide, how am I going to grow my financial nest egg for retirement? I mean, it comes down to the individual level. And I say that because I think I've obviously always been innately passionate about the power of women financially in deciding to co-found a company. 2/3 of our management team was women, which we started growing over 15 years ago, which was rare. And the company started to scale and grow success. And in an industry where our clients were largely women making decisions. And about 15 years into my entrepreneurial journey, the company started doing really well, really scaling big. Big discussions about diversifying into new products and services, growing a big management team, maybe a private equity partner. And my co-founder is a male, happens to be my husband. And I said to him one day, I said, you know, I thought when we finally kind of made it, that life would be easy, that success would bring everything from comfort to lots of friends and camaraderie. And I'm more alone than I've ever been in my entire life because I don't have any cohorts who run businesses over 10 million in revenue who are female, who think about how am I going to participate in investing financially for my own future. I was not yet thinking about the ecosystem that my peers are talking about. And about every 6 months, I would say this to my husband. And I would say, do you feel this way? Is this just kind of a success thing? And finally, he said to me after maybe the 5th time in 2 years, he said, listen, you've chosen this path. And it's a great path. And you're early in the evolution. And you're rocking it. And I'm really thrilled. But you need to let this go. Because no, I don't feel like you. There's a man on every corner doing what I'm doing. And I said, okay. And I let it go for about 5 years. And then an exit came, and I said, what do I do next? If I'm not going back into business, how do I pay it forward and how to be a part of this ecosystem that has been so amazing for me? And I started to research. And my research unveiled facts like, although we own 39% of all businesses in the United States today, only 2% of us will cross the $1 million mark. We employ only 4% of the US workforce. We generate only 4% of revenue in the United States, and we employ only 6.2% of our workforce. And why? Barriers that are a part of the evolution. And how do we knock down those barriers? We all agree with 100% certainty that access to capital is a significant way to knock down those barriers. And I believe that what we do individually matters. It's the first steps in the 10-step process to build long-term systemic change. And so I said, I've had this great life as a female entrepreneur, and I'm early in the evolution. So I am going to grow my financial skill, and I'm going to learn how to be an angel investor. I'm going to learn how to be a mentor, besides as the CEO of a company. I'm going to learn to lead deals, and I'm going to learn to manage a portfolio of investments. Now, I didn't say anything about women just now, did I? But I entered the space, and to be honest with you, my portfolio has teams led by men and women. But when I choose to engage with my time as a deal lead, as a board member, as a mentor, it's always with women. Because, as Pam shared, the statistics are there that we can be as good, if not better, as founders and investors. We just need people like us to help start breaking down the barriers. So that's why I invest.
Thanks. All of you have given different data on the business performance and financial performance outdoing companies that don't have women in charge. And these data go back at least 2 decades. Why isn't anyone doing anything with this? If it shows that performance will improve, period, why aren't the investors paying attention?
I think the strength of the data and the breadth of the data is only really happened this decade. So people, the unconscious biases that we've talked about and that every female entrepreneur who's gone out seeking money or anybody who's been in a venture capital room filled with men, we know that there are biases, even filled with women, so I shouldn't make that blanket statement. When we first looked at investing as part of our Tingari Group portfolio, started looking at specific venture capital firms we would invest in, one being True Wealth Ventures, and a majority of the financial management team said, well, Sarah and Kerry don't have a track record of investing together, so we can't invest in them. We recommend you do not do that. And so we said, well, hold on a minute, that's a very rigid perception of what is success and what is a track record. If only 2% of venture capital goes to women, if only 1% of women make up venture capital decision-making team, then how can they possibly, in all of America, have worked together over several years? Is statistically not possible. So we said we need to redefine what constitutes for success. You cannot find a venture capitalist more qualified than this lady and her partner. And they have a very great track record of success. It just wasn't together. So I think we have very 20th century models of what constitutes success, and where our minds are taking a while to catch up to what the evidence is so compellingly telling us.
I have nothing to add to that.
Stephanie?
I mean, just, in summary, our cultural norms are older and stronger in business than our brand new data. And the data is accurate. We just need voices to bring the data into the boardroom. It begins here, and I'm looking at a room full of largely of women. But this is where it begins, and it has to have a swift and a strong trajectory from here into the boardroom where there are men sitting at the table, because data talks, and it's on the way, but we are a part of that path.
And the evidence is what we need to keep trumping as women, as men. We need to keep bringing that evidence to the consciousness of whoever is making those kinds of decisions, because one of the fundamental biases of human beings is we see what we believe. So we have to, as people out looking for money or trying to change behaviours, we have to keep throwing up the evidence and saying, well, what you believe is actually not quite right. The evidence is suggesting something else.
Another thing that fascinates me is the unconscious bias that each of you have mentioned. Can you go a little bit deeper into that and tell us how the unconscious bias also affects women, and why does that happen?
Maybe I'll tell a story. I went to, I'm sure she won't mind me sharing this because she spoke about it in her session yesterday. One of the direct impact investments our Tingari Group does is in the company Verb, a local Austin company that started about 5 years ago by Susie Sosa and Tom Meredith. It was a spin out from the University of Texas, and it ran competitions to build a social impact ecosystem around the world. So they had $5 million from Dell, and they were extraordinarily successful within UT. They spun it out from UT. Susie, as an entrepreneur, wanted to grow a $500 million company, and she realised that the competition business it was more of a consulting business. They were providing a service of running competitions, and she couldn't see that becoming a $500 million company. So she was talking yesterday about this phase of the business that was Verb 101 as being a failure. And yet if I was looking at that as just another business person saying, share what it is about your business, what was your growth and what was the annual income, she was not a failure and the company was not a failure. So I think women can be our own worst enemies as well, and the facts again speak for themselves. If even when decision makers know they are being observed. For example, South by Southwest, somebody tweeted this morning that of the 600 pitches that came before South by Southwest, in the entertainment and film section, there's one female judge amongst all male judges said that of the 8 pitches that she was a part of, not a single female was part of it. So even when we know we are trying to be inclusive and trying to include women, we don't. And it's very embedded in the way we think of ourselves as well as how others think of us. So it needs to be proactive. And as the woman who heads up the Global Summit for Women, which is being held in Sydney this year in about a month's time, said, if you don't believe in quotas, get over it, because quotas are going to be one of the ways that we get rid of those biases, because the data also show when you've got a woman, the performance is there.
So maybe I'll touch on 2 things. One is kind of a cultural bias, I guess, in terms of women as investors. And there was a global study that was done researching both women's and men's perspectives on their financial literacy. And it was women in the United States that rated about the highest, or they were on par with another country in terms of the highest financial literacy globally, but they rated themselves lowest. And so there's some really weird cultural thing in the US for women where they don't see themselves as, adequate investors, yet they are, like, you were talking about. So that's one. And the other is based on a study that just was recently written up like a couple weeks ago in the Harvard Business Review out of Columbia University. Maybe it was a little bit before that. They kind of blend. Anyway, recently about TechCrunch Disrupt, which is a very well-known pitch competition. And they recorded the questions that were asked for the male entrepreneurs and the women entrepreneurs from both male and female investors. And consistently, the women entrepreneurs got what were determined or were called prevention questions, I guess. And the male entrepreneurs got promotional questions. And so if that consistently happens, then as women entrepreneurs, it's great to know that that's what you're going to be getting, but you've got to continue to pivot and make it a promotional answer. But if those are the questions that the audience continues to hear the women entrepreneurs getting, even if they spin it, answer it well, it just cuts, down on their credibility and shows all the risky parts of their business versus, the competition, which is getting all the how big could it get and how, So that's a major unconscious bias that's really hindering women entrepreneurs in the venture capital and pitch scenarios.
And I'll end actually with a call to action for the room. I think we are a part of our society and our societal norms. We're also a part, as women, who are looking to help make change happen. And it's tough to have one of those hats on and then take it off and have the other hat on, or have both of them on at the same time. And I'll push the envelope a little bit and say that you have unconscious bias. We have unconscious bias when we read something in the newspaper about a successful man or successful woman or a team of men or a team of women. And we have it whether we want to have it or not. And I think the call to action is a real simple one. Be aware that you have it. Be aware that you have it, and being aware will help you get rid of it. I think self-awareness is half the battle. And I'll wrap up my call to action with a little study that was done. I think it was done by MIT about 3 years ago. And there was a team of men and a team of women who were given the exact same product, the exact same deck, the exact same script, down to the word. They were even coached by the same coaches. And they pitched in front of 2 panels that were equally men and women of all ages. And both panels unanimously selected the men, which is proof that women have unconscious bias. And we're human. And I guess the call to action is, don't beat yourself up. Just know that we have it and recognize it, and then make the opposite decision when you recognize the unconscious bias. But if you don't recognize it, you can't take action. So there's the call to action.
Why should the entrepreneurs in the audience seek women investors?
Well, I guess they should seek women investors who are self-aware. No, but women that are specifically calling out the fact that they see the value in women, or any investor, frankly. I mean, I think more women investors are investing with a proactive gender lens, so to speak. But I think, as a woman entrepreneur, targeting somebody who understands the value that you bring is going to help, get over the barrier.
And again, back to the evidence, when there is a woman involved, the collective intelligence of the decision-making group goes up and the quality of the decisions is better. There's also research showing that there is less scandal and problems with bad behaviour. Those don't happen with women. So, elephant in the room. Another another entrepreneur we'd invested in said, I met with her maybe 2 months ago, and she said, I still, in this day and age, after the Me Too movement in the last year, still have 2 investors as she was making the next round of pitch for the next round of investment. Still 2 investors who are trying to hit on her. I'm not saying women don't hit on women, but it's statistically less likely. But the evidence is still the performance is better when there's a woman.
There's a great data point that when women VCs invest in women entrepreneurs, their chance of a successful exit goes up by 32.1%. So there's great data. Yeah.
I think you should seek out women investors for 2 reasons. One is, as Pam said, they're going to understand your business, even if your business is highly technical. They're going to understand your business or want to understand your business in today's ecosystem, I think, more easily than a man. But I think it's really important for the founders in the room to note that this panel is about also growing women investors, and there are fewer women investors than there are women founders right now. So I don't think we're going to move the needle, and you're not going to have a lot of success if your strategy is to go out and only find women investors. Your strategy needs to look for good investors, period. And to be honest with you, I think your very best team of investors is going to be where you have men and women, just like we were talking about how founder teams that are diverse are more successful. I think investor teams that are more diverse are more successful.
Thanks. We're going to open up to questions in 1 second. I'm going to ask each of you to give a couple things to the audience that they can do as soon as they walk out of the room today or tomorrow that would advance the cause. And I wanted to let everyone also know that Stephanie will be signing her book from 5 to 5:30 in room 10C on the 3rd floor of the Austin Convention Center if you want to go. So yeah, give some advice to these folks.
I'd start off by saying use the evidence, because we can share, anybody who wants to contact us later, we can share with you all of the studies that we have talked about today. The evidence is substantial, it's strong, and it's compelling. So if you are out doing a pitch for someone to invest in your company, use those data and show that on the whole, women's performance is extraordinarily good, and that they need women in their portfolio, women entrepreneurs in their portfolio for that reason alone, let alone anything else. The other thing I would say, that in our research looking at the future of entrepreneurship and impact, knowing that women will be controlling 70% of the world's wealth by 2030, we do need to step up as investors and understand the power of our own purses. And as you've been saying, Stephanie, we need to really educate ourselves on how to make decisions, how to read financial data, how to ensure we've got a balanced portfolio. We, as women, need to do that. So you can also go out and talk to all your female friends, even if it's part of a crowd fund. Use your dollars to invest in other women.
Ditto. No. I think really just realizing that everybody in here is an investor. Women are making 85% of consumer purchase decisions. So every single dollar, literally, that you decide to buy a coffee from this place or that place or shop on Amazon, what product you're buying or what grocery store you're going to, whatever. All of those are investments, and women are making 85% of those investments, and I don't think that largely we think about those as, these micro investments as investments, but they move the markets. They decide which products are going to win and lose in the markets, and which investment teams are going to, which executive teams you're supporting with your dollars. And then, as we come into greater control of investment wealth, manage that and really understand your portfolio, and don't let a wealth advisor just take care of it. Really ask the questions and, understand what markets you're moving every day with those, 401ks or whatever, mutual funds. And then I think as women, we need to start sharing investment advice with each other. That's one of the things we've seen with over 80% of our investors being women. A lot of the women just were never asked to invest in a venture capital fund before, because when they go to the cocktail parties, they're talking about other stuff, whereas a lot of the guys are like, hey, I got this fund opportunity and I can let you in or whatever. It's just not part of the conversation that we have with our friends, and I think that that should change so we can wield our power.
And my thoughts are kind of wrapped around simple, actionable things that you can do as an individual. In the media, we read about how we need to break down the barriers. We need more women in boardrooms. We need more women who are venture capital partners. But I think sometimes the solutions that are on the page are too upstream. And as individuals, even sitting in this room, we think to ourselves, we're waiting for the people to solve the barriers so things will get easier. Well, the reality is, we are the people. Mm-hmm. We are it right now. This is it. And therefore, our individual efforts matter. They matter at epic proportions, and they build the foundation so that long-term systemic action can have traction. So when you walk out of here today, believe that your efforts every day matter. And here's 3 things that I think you should be doing every day very simply, whether you're a founder or whether you're looking to become an investor. And the first one is commit to just having more knowledge and education. And it doesn't have to take days and months and weeks and years. We're not talking PhDs. We're talking about taking 20 minutes a day to read 3 articles in the ecosystem. Know that there are 11 million female founders in the United States, and only 2% of us are crossing the $1 million mark. That basic information alone helps drive your decisions. Listen to podcasts, attend a few seminars. That broad knowledge makes a difference in your financial decisions as a founder and as a potential investor. Second, take that knowledge and grow skill. It is, I don't know if it's an entrepreneurial problem because I've lived in the entrepreneurial space too long, but we get busy in the moment. And we're rock stars at a few things, and we just keep doing those things. But we need to grow skill, particularly financial skill, if we want founders to have capital and if we want women to be the ones supplying it. And it's not rocket science. It takes a little bit of reading. It takes some good question asking and getting good answers. And you grow that skill, and all of a sudden, you don't have to be a rock star at investing or financial principles, but you know enough to hold your own and to play a part in the ecosystem. I'll give you a little example of this. The Michigan Microloan Fund for Women raised $5 million to specifically fund female entrepreneurs. And 90% of the women who applied for funds couldn't get through the application because they didn't have the financial knowledge. And then the third thing is put that knowledge and that skill to work. And to dovetail on what Sarah said about sharing, collaborate and mentor with other women with one really, really important criteria that I'm going to say women are not very good at. Do it when you get something in return. Do it when there's a win for both you and the person you're collaborating with. Otherwise, it's not worth your incredibly valuable time-strapped time. I'll give you my own example. So a few months ago, with a woman who's here in the room, Melinda Garvey, we hosted a session to help educate executive-level women in the Austin market who are very successful on how to be women investors. And it was in my living room, so it was a safe space. It was like angel investing for dummies. Ask anything you want. And I was paying it forward and giving back. But why did I do it? I did it for two reasons, besides giving forward and paying back. I did it because I was going to help raise money for Melinda's company, of which I'm an investor, and I want to make money. And second, I did it because I think this is a potential business idea, and this was a guinea pig group for me to learn from. So I was getting something really valuable out of it. And that's just one example. You can apply that to your own lives 100 times over. So learn, grow skill, and collaborate and mentor when you get something in return.
Great, thanks. All right, let's get a question.
Oh.
All right. Thank you, ladies, for being here. I really appreciate everything you've said. It's been tweeted all over the internet. My name is Monica Antohi. I run the business magazine for women, and I would love to talk to all of you after, if possible. But how do we get in front of male investors and not deal with all that bias? How do we get in front of them and pitch what we need to pitch and just get through the message, get the message through and make sure that they're talking to us like they would talk to any other person in the room, and male or female? How do we do that? Good luck. Thank you.
Yeah.
Enjoy.
I think understanding the advantages you have
Yeah.
and also where you're disadvantaged as a woman entrepreneur. And so I actually recommend, because the pitch data is what it is, to try not to get into a pitch session, to actually, have coffee with the entrepreneur. With the investor.
Yeah.
And have it more conversational, and know how to expect and don't get aggravated at the preventional questions and spin them into promotional. And stay, positive.
I'm gonna
And
give that to
use the data about success and women's addition to group decision making and how they raise collective performance and how they'll raise their portfolio. So know what the biases are and make your arguments that counter those biases with the evidence.
with data.
And I'll add, when you get the pitch,
Yep.
or you're pitching to get the pitch, be better than everyone else.
Yeah.
Your data, your
We
organization,
are.
your financials. Can someone understand what your company does in one sentence on a slide? Be better than everyone else. And I'm stealing this from another presentation I saw yesterday. Expect that you are underestimated and use it as an opportunity to blow them away.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Hi, I'm Melinda Garvey, the founder of On the Dot, and we're all about providing relatable role models for women through our daily 4-minute podcast. And what I was going to actually ask a little more detail about to get you to tell that story about the women investors, but I'm sure a lot of you are challenged, and I hear this a lot, that when you're raising money individually to your friends, family, colleagues, you do find that women a lot of them just give you this blank stare because they don't know how to invest. So, besides that cocktail party, which was very successful and enlightening, and, we got investors out of it, and they were coming up to us and thanking us. And I was like, well, that's not how it works. We're supposed to thank you when you invest. But what other things is there something else out there, or do we need to start something where there's a really safe place for women to learn and to not feel like they're being, they're embarrassed because they don't know this information? Because a lot of women were like, yeah, I don't want to ask questions because I was sort of embarrassed, but now I'm in this safe space of other women and I can ask these questions. Is there anything else out there like that? Because if not, we should start that business too.
We've investigated over the last couple of years trying to get more women to invest in Sarah and Kerry's True Wealth Ventures. And we've investigated various legal entities like investment clubs. We thought of 1,000 women investing $1,000 each. We looked at piggybacking through the Austin Community Foundation, but then we'd lose control and the opportunity to be participating as investors. So we've explored multiple ways of doing that. We're still in the process of doing it. The other thing I would suggest is that don't just think of capital as venture capital, that there are, you've already tapped all your family and friends, but there's crowds, there's cryptocurrency coming out, there's awards and competitions, there are research funds if you're grant funds, if your company is doing something that is innovative in biotech, for example, then there are other forms of capital other than venture capital as well.
So the bottom line is we need to take the cocktail party on the roadshow.
I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what Carrie and I did a lot of, actually, and we had some of our wonderful LPs, some of them sitting right here in the room, have parties for us where they invited, you know, as investors, then they invited their friends to hear the pitch, and I think that's what works, is because women tend to like to not hear it top down, but hear it from, you know, peers and have more of that open dialogue and no dumb questions kind
And
of stuff.
everyone can do that,
Yeah.
right? You can invite people in your home
I
to
think
learn.
we're in a grassroots movement right now.
Yeah.
Hi, how are you? My name is Renee Graham. I'm the founder of RenzoBox. It's about modular makeup and makeup on the go. I'm trying to get rid of the messy makeup bag. Hi, Sarah. And first, I just wanted to thank you guys because about a year ago, I started looking for female funding across the United States, and I had to go to San Francisco and New York to look for a lot more female venture and capital and angel investors. And I just really want to thank you for being here in Texas because I feel like the groundswell is starting, and I really, really appreciate it that it's local because I'm a Texan. So anyway, my question to you is about strength of conviction in this female-driven sort of mission, because in my own company, I'm trying to do that as well, even though I'm not where you guys are yet. But you know, if I need a web coder, if I need a video person, if I need an industrial engineer or designer or something like that, I seek out women who are good at that. And I have a lot of trouble just because I know I need to move forward in the next steps. You know, I have a timeline. And they're just, it's difficult to find that. And I imagine, and even looking for funding, like I said, I've had trouble as well. I would really love to be funded by females, but I have males that want to fund me right now. So I'm just curious, like, when do we cut our losses? You know, like, you know, I'm trying to figure out, like, when do I cut my losses and just keep moving forward? And how do I stay strong to that conviction? And it's probably the same for a lot of women in here. So I'm hoping this is applicable to more people.
I'll start with a non-data response, but just an experience response. What I'm hearing in your voice is you're doing the right thing. Here's the bottom line, and I'm speaking from my own experience, being exactly where you are, in that you're self-aware, you're trying to eliminate unconscious bias, and you're putting your best foot forward in that you are consciously seeking to give women opportunities within your firm. However, you're also a business owner, and the job needs to go to the best person who can move the needle for you in your company in this moment. And I promise you, over time, with your focus, you'll have at least 50% of your company that will be women.
I would add in a global sense, you feel like you're trying to do things now that you need a critical mass of women to be able to do. And if we think of 2030, so the next decade, and 70% of the world's assets being assumed, women controlling those assets, if you put that in terms of the venture capital industry, by 2030, that means that 70% of money going into venture capital is also being controlled by women. So we're on the cusp of a very significant change in the configuration of who owns and controls the capital. And we're also on the cusp, because of connective technology, that radical transparency will change the 2% alone, because data, you were talking earlier about data analytics and when will we see that happening in entrepreneurship and in venture capital. It's already happening. So no longer will the 2% be acceptable, no longer will bad behaviours be acceptable, because they will be displayed to the world instantaneously. So we are on the cusp of a very significant change, not necessarily led by women, but led by technology.
So I hear keep trying and we'll get there.
Yeah,
Pretty much.
you're on the right track.
Hi, I'm Sonia Sepaban. Thank you so much for all your comments. I have a very long background as a corporate executive. I'm an engineer by training. I've had P&L and lots of people all over the world building lots of aerospace and defense products. And during that time, I was a tomboy, and I was one of the boys, and I did okay. But you talked about data, and having been in that role, there is data, and so I'm interested to learn if you know of other data that's available. And when I looked, there was not really contextual, very relevant, and detailed enough data for me or any executive to look at it and run the D&I and improve D&I like we did everything else. You have sales or goals or margin or anything else. And that's very important, because as much as we talk about tech, and it's very, very important, I'm also in tech, I'm also an angel investor, 80 plus million people in this country, over about 70% of all the workforce, works for 2% of the companies in this country. So there's relatively few number of companies that control this whole thing about D&I of a lot of the workforce. So if inside of the companies, people like me, at senior levels, at management levels, had the tools or the data that they felt was relevant. It's not just, in your region, it's like, I always thought, I'm in defense, I'm at a tank plant, we're probably okay, even though we really weren't that great at all. So people kind of talk themselves into it when there's not really relevant data. Are you seeing anything?
Yes, I can give you one source, and that's all you need. It's McKinsey & Company, Women Matters. And they've got a huge body of research, and they partner with Lean In, Sheryl Sandberg's group, Wall Street
Yes.
Journal. And they're definitely on the arm of all those 2% CEOs anyway.
I hired McKinsey. I had consultants,
Right.
all of them. And they have data, but they do these surveys like once a year, and it's it's still very easy to disregard it when you're sitting. And I sit on a public board now, and all these things. When you sit on boards and things, it's very easy to say, "Oh, that's nice." But that's once every other year, or it's a big survey,
Right.
and it's a few hundred companies. How representative is it of us? I'm just pointing a pain point that I saw as an operating executive.
No,
I've seen
and you're
other-
exactly right. And to share, and I'm looking at a relatively young room in here, have patience. We didn't start collecting data on women in entrepreneurship nationwide in the United States until 1997. It's only been 20 years. And the reality is the body of data that people start to pay attention to, as Pam was talking about, we're 20 years in, and your question is relevant. We probably need a couple more decades, which is unfortunate. But more and more studies are being done every year. In the beginning, it was just studies being done every 5 years when the survey of business owners was conducted. Now institutions are going deeper, and they're doing it every year, and more data is coming, as Sarah just
It's really
referenced.
solid now.
No, it's certainly
Then
improved.
I would say it won't take 2 decades because of radical transparency. That the
Yeah.
next decade, we'll see those data, and there'll be substantial cross-referencing to all the data.
I was going to say the same thing. I'm not that patient, but I'll talk to you offline.
We're almost out of time, but ask it real quick and see if we can answer real quick.
Okay.
Thank you so much for all of your comments. I really appreciate it. My name is Brooke Epley, and I would call myself a beginning angel investor. Sarah, you talked a lot about the importance of there being more female GPs. And as the work that I've been involved in has involved the evaluation of the business models of hundreds of startups and negotiating deals, but not in an investment context. And for someone who's maybe mid to mid-late career stage and is curious about the path of going from a beginning angel investor to GP, what does that look like, and does that even exist, or how do you forge a path?
Maybe I'll talk to you offline.
Okay.
All right, I think we're done. Thanks, everybody.
Okay.